All right, let's get to the final video for this topic, the fundamentals of exercise for nutrition, what to eat, when, and why. We'll review the fuel and utilization during exercise, aerobic versus anaerobic, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and then we'll spend some time looking at thermal regulation and hydration. The energy-yielding nutrients are macronutrients, are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. This is what provides us with calories. This is where we get our ATP for muscle contraction. They tend to work together. We get energy from all three macronutrients, but depending on the diet, the intensity and duration of the activity, carbohydrate or fat will predominate. If we're doing high intensity exercise, the lactic acid from the carbohydrate will be the major source of energy. As you decrease the intensity and increase the duration, carbohydrates will completely break down in the mitochondria, providing us with more energy. We also use fat during longer intensity, lower duration exercise. And while we've talked about the importance of using protein for a lot of other functions in the body, I also said in the previous video that if you're on a very low carbohydrate diet, your body may draw on your lean muscle mass for energy. Not what you want. The objective of dietary carbohydrate management is to maintain blood sugar and replete muscle glycogen. Recall, glycogen is how we store glucose in the body. We store it in the liver and we store it in the muscle. And it's the muscle glycogen that's used to provide ATP during exercise. During high-intensity exercise, lactic acid is formed to provide us with ATP for muscle contraction. And then as you decrease the intensity, increase the duration, that pyruvic acid can enter into the mitochondria, completely breaking down the glucose molecule. We call this oxidizing glucose and providing us with a lot more ATP. But as we've said before, we have a limited capacity to store carbohydrate in our body. And that's why in the marathon, the example I gave was the experience of hitting the wall. Usually in a marathon, I'm told, not that I have any experience with it, that it occurs around mile 20. A person hits the wall when their glycogen stores are completely depleted. They're basically running on whatever carbohydrate they're consuming while they're in action, whatever beverages they're drinking, whatever goo they're consuming or swallowing. That's what's providing them with the glucose to help finish the marathon. After exercise, glycogen repletion can begin as soon as you start eating. It can prepare your energy stores for the next workout. Now, please understand you don't need to eat right away. If somebody's competing in a marathon, for example, they may not feel like eating right away. What you need to know is that your glycogen stores will be repleted. They will fill up again, whether you eat right after you exercise, within an hour, within 2 hours. Consuming meals, this is cocktail chatter. Consuming meals that provide a combination of carbohydrate and protein in a 3 to 1 gram ratio is supposed to be optimum for muscle glycogen repletion. The recommendations for dietary fats for athletes are the same as those for the rest of the population. They're made to support health and to meet the dietary recommendations. It's suggested to consume low-fat foods prior to an exercise because fat takes longer to digest. And the athlete is recommended to get about 20 to 25% of their calories from fat. Now, this can vary and recommendations may be changing, but as I talked about in the video on where do those ATPs come from, the ATP, the energy for high intensity, short duration exercise is not, you don't get a lot of that from fat, but it is an important reservoir of energy during prolonged low intensity exercise. If we look on the left, when you begin an exercise or an activity, you primarily are drawing on your carbohydrate stores at 85% in this example. Over time, your carbohydrate stores start to go down. You also, at the beginning, are using a little bit of fat. Notice protein isn't in there. Over time, you begin to draw more on your fat stores because you're beginning to deplete your glycogen stores. Theoretically, in the generic person, as we know, who doesn't exist, it's around 20 minutes that crossover occurs and you start drawing more on your fat stores. It doesn't mean that you have to exercise for at least 20 minutes in order to lose body fat. It means that in that moment, after 20 minutes, your body is using triglyceride for energy. One of the things that occurs as a result of training is that athletes are able to start turning to fat sooner, thus conserving their glycogen stores. Our activity this week, or one of the activities when we meet next, will be my giving you in your different groups. It could be the Boston Trail, hiking the trail, completing the marathon. And what I will do is give you in the different groups one of these activities. The first thing you're supposed to do is determine whether the activity is aerobic or anaerobic. And then you're supposed to tell me what kind of fuel is being used for that particular moment in that particular activity and why. Is the person or the people, are they using their ATP creatine phosphate stores? Please go back and look at the video to review that, although I do have it listed at the bottom. Are you drawing on lactic acid? Are you drawing on completely oxidized carbohydrate? Or are you drawing on fat? So that will be part of the activities that we'll do when we meet next class. Fluid and electrolytes are important during exercise as well. If any of you have ever experienced dehydration or electrolyte imbalance, you know what I'm talking about. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about fluid balance and thermal or temperature regulation, the importance of water, what happens during dehydration, the electrolytes, hyperthermia, high blood temperature, hypothermia, low blood temperature, and overhydration, which we'll also discuss again when we talk about fluids for those of you that have the book, Module 5. The ability to keep the body cool during exercise is key to exercise capacity and avoiding injury. When you're exercising, when your muscles are contracting, that's an inefficient process. And what happens is that heat is released. That causes the temperature of your blood to increase. Body gets rid of that heat by sweating. As a result of sweating, you not only lose the heat, but you also lose fluid and you also lose electrolytes. Here we go. A lot of heat is generated in the body due to inefficiencies of energy transfer to make ATP. Sweating creates that evaporative cooling system used during exercise to help keep your core body temperature in a functional range. Remember when we talked about denaturing proteins, that proteins are broken down by the acid in the stomach? Temperature is something that also denatures protein. I believe one of the examples I gave was hard boiling an egg wrong, that the albumin leaks out into the boiling water and changes structure. Okay, so we're not talking about your body temperature getting that high, but if your body temperature does go up really high, if you are not able to get rid of that excess heat, it can result in internal body damage. So our core body temperature rises during exercise, and if the temperature is greater than 104 degrees Fahrenheit, that can affect your ability to exercise, and it increases risk for injury. Hyperthermia is increase in blood temperature. Not only are you losing fluid, but you're losing salt and other electrolytes. Sodium chloride are the electrolytes that the body is losing in sweat. And the fluid that's lost comes from the part of the bloodstream that's referred to as plasma. We have blood and we also have a reservoir of plasma. And that volume, that's the fluid that the body will lose during sweating. Once plasma volume is depleted, aerobic exercise capacity decreases severely because dehydration may be getting out of control, and the person may be developing heat stroke. Heat stroke is an acute and dangerous reaction to the buildup of temperature in the body, and this requires emergency medical attention. Sometimes it can, if you've been outside in the dry temperature where there's no humidity, you may not be able to tell that your body's sweating because as you sweat, it evaporates really quickly. A person can develop sunstroke. If not treated immediately, it can lead to death. Symptoms include a body temperature of 104 degrees Fahrenheit, hot, dry, red skin, sudden cessation of sweating, deep breathing and fast pulse, blurred vision. It's not a good thing. Have any of you ever experienced heat stroke, or have you ever been dehydrated? What happened? How are you treated? And I'm glad you're still here. To prevent heat stroke, drink plenty of fluid before, during, and after physical activity. Avoid exercising in hot weather and stop exercising at any sign of heat exhaustion. And when I talk about exercising in hot weather, the thing is that if you are Exercising when it's humid out, you can be aware that your body is sweating because you can just feel it. You know what that's like. But the risk is when it's dry, when you're in dry conditions. Sweat evaporates really quickly. You may not be aware that you're sweating, and that can be